Well, taking a look at the first review questions on Aristotle's Politics, really not so easy. I didn't realize until I was looking over that they were rather difficult questions. But I'd just give you how I would answer them if that's any help. This is something that I'll do. Looking at review questions. Number one, why does Aristotle say that the political community aims at the highest good? Well, that's a difficult question, as I said. If we look at what he says here in the very beginning, every state is a community of some kind, and every community is established with a view to some good. First, mankind always act in order to obtain that which they think good. But if all communities aim at some good, the state, or political community, which is the highest of all, and which embraces all the rest, aims at a good in a greater degree than any other, and at the highest good. So I guess the question is, what does he mean when he says that the state or political community embraces all the rest? I suppose the idea is that, okay, the family is a community of some sort, and it aims at some good. But the family, let's say, is part of the neighborhood, a larger community, which aims at some good. So whatever good that the neighborhood aims at is larger. The neighborhood is part of the city, let's say, in the modern sense, and the city aims at some good, and so that whatever good that it aims at is higher and more comprehensive, and so on to the state or the country or political community. So I suppose we could take it in that sense, that because every community, by definition, he said, aims at some good, the larger the community, the larger the good, or the higher the community, the higher the good. That would probably be the easiest answer, but it's not really clear whether how communities like that are, whether they're related to each other in that simple way. Obviously, in the sense that, well, is a family really part of a neighborhood in the sense that the neighborhood has a good, and what does he mean when he says that the state aims at a good at all? So it's a difficult question, but I think you can see his way of thinking is that different communities can be thought of as being part of larger communities, which themselves can be thought of larger community. And finally, we get to the state. So if the state aims at a good, it must be, in a certain sense, the most comprehensive good. Now, whether you agree with that, do you agree? Well, I don't know. It's up to you. Number two, what is Aristotle's distinction between a king and a statesman? That also comes towards the beginning here, when he says that when the government is personal, the ruler is a king. And I suppose, what did we mean by personal? I suppose we mean by like hereditary rule. And when, according to the rules of the political science, the citizens rule and are ruled in turn, then he's called a statesman. I suppose that would be like a constitutional state where somebody didn't fulfill the office because they were a particular, member of a particular family. Let's say like the English monarchy. You have to be a member of the Windsor family and be the next in line after the reigning monarch in order to rule. It's all very personal. Whereas if you're a statesman, that just means that you fulfill a certain office, and your person, who you are personally doesn't matter. Right? It's the office that matters, not the person. And anybody can, at least in our country, anybody can fulfill that office as long as they're a citizen. Right? You don't have to be part of a hereditary aristocracy of some sort. I think that is the distinction. But I have to say that, this, how we're supposed to take this second paragraph is not exactly clear, because at the beginning of the next paragraph, he says, but all this is a mistake. Now, I'm not quite sure he means this last distinction is a mistake too. I think that he's definitely saying that this first statement, that leaders only differ in the number of their subjects, is a mistake. So reading Aristotle is not so easy, but I think that distinction, as I wanted, to explain it, I think that's more or less what it means. Number 3, when Aristotle says man is a political animal, what do you think he means? Well, of course, that's up to you. And that, in certain senses, that's the central idea of this reading, that human beings, human beings are political animals. What do you think he means? It might help to put that in context. Let me just make sure I can find it. On page 3, hence it is evident that the state is a creation of nature. So the idea of human beings being political animals is associated with the idea of the state being a natural thing, and that man is by nature a political animal. I always took it to mean that because the state is natural, it's natural for human beings to live within a state. And the state for him means the polis. The polis is the city. Athens was a polis. Thebes, Sparta. Self-governing political communities. The human beings were meant to live in such communities. They were meant to live in the state because the state is a natural outgrowth of the human, essence. That the state is not something artificial, but it's something that develops naturally as human beings associate with each other. And we're meant to live in a political community. I think it's a very strong idea. We're not meant to live a solitary life, and we're not meant to live in groups that are simple groups like herds, like animals. We're meant to live in political communities, which is basically communities that are governed by law, not just love, not just affection, but law. Aristotle says that the state is a creation of nature. I think I've given you my ideas on that. The state is something that develops naturally out of these simpler forms of community. That's why he says we go back to the association between men and women, which is, that's his idea. I'm not saying that is the way I think of it, not necessarily, but I think it's natural for him to say, well, the first natural association is between male and female, as he says, and then we have the family, and then the village, and then the state. He basically says if the original relationships or communities, like the family and the household, are natural, then because the state evolves out of those, then it's natural too, as opposed to being an artificial creation. As we'll see in later political philosophy, really liberalism, I would say that the state is clearly a device. It's an instrument, and it's artificial, as opposed to ancient ideas of the political community as being natural. I think it's a very interesting contrast that we'll see in this course. And then finally, what quote do you think best exemplifies? I mean, there's a gimme here. Man is a political animal. That's the one I've obviously chosen as the one that best exemplifies the most important idea. But you can choose whatever you like, of course.